Now that you've chosen your target audience and you've selected a goal that's aligned with their interests, it's time to start thinking about what it is that you want to say. But unfortunately, there's a hitch. Most people's attention spans are really pretty short, and unfortunately, in the digital age, they seem to be getting shorter. So from personal experience, I can say that my world is crowded with all kinds of things. It's crowded with the news and what's going on in the world. It's crowded with my very busy work schedule. It's crowded with personal obligations with my family and friends. And bluntly, it's crowded by all of the distractions that I get on my phone. So there are lots of different things that distract people, and you have to, as a communicator, think about how you want to cut through all of those distractions and focus people's attention. And to solve this problem, you as a communicator really need to think about how to focus your audience's attention and how to do it deliberately. And so, in other words, you need to focus on what you want your audience to remember after your conversation ends, and then design your communication effort around that idea so that you can effectively deliver that message. In our experience at Relate, it's most effective to focus attention on one takeaway idea, just one. And just to be really clear here, by saying a single takeaway idea, we are not saying that this idea is boring, we are not saying that it's simple, and we're not saying it's intuitive. Rather, what we're saying is that this single idea is rich and it's complex and it's built on key supporting ideas that you can use to start shaping the narrative. But the key here is that it's just one idea. And for the purposes of this teach-out, we're going to refer to this as a central message. And I want to come back to this idea of why it's important to focus on one central message just for another second. In an ideal world, the number of ideas that you would include in any given communication effort, which we've plotted on the x-axis of this plot, would be proportional to the number of ideas that your audience would understand and remember, which is on the y-axis. And so that blue line represents what the ideal circumstance would be. Is you could deliver 5 or 6 different ideas and your audience would walk away understanding and remembering all of them. But that's not what happens in reality. In reality, if you don't focus what you want to say around 1, maybe 2 specific ideas and really sharpen the way that you talk about those ideas in specific ways, your audience's attention is going to drop off pretty dramatically. And so this is why we give the very, very, very strong recommendation that you focus on one central message at a time. And so a central message, just to reiterate again, is a conscious, deliberate attempt on your part as the speaker to focus your audience's attention on a single takeaway idea. And I would argue that central messages serve different purposes for both sides of a communication effort. So let's break it up. Let's start with the speaker. For a speaker, a central message is an organizing principle. It's an organizing principle that you use to base your communication effort around a central focus. It is never, ever going to be the only thing that you say. So think about it this way. If you took the stage and just repeated the same sentence, your central message, over and over and over again, people wouldn't stay to listen to the rest of your talk. They would walk away. So it's not that your central message is the only thing that you're going to say. It's just that it's the core of what you want to say. And we also want to acknowledge that the central message itself will probably oversimplify a lot of the nuance that you want to convey with the entirety of your talk. But since it's an organizing principle, what you can use it for is to define which ideas fit within the scope of that central message and which ideas need to be cut out. So before I move on from this, from a speaker's perspective, I want to sort of take a very quick side tangent and say that you can be explicit about a central message by stating it as a key point at some point in your communication effort. And for most people's purposes, this is either the beginning or the end. But it, in and of itself, is not the basis of a talk. And if you decide to state your central message explicitly, it's really important that you do your best to wordsmith it to make it memorable. And for some great recommendations on how to do this, we really strongly recommend the book Made to Stick. So go ahead and read that if you're interested in stating your central message explicitly in any kind of a communication effort. So now that we've talked a little bit about what central messages do for the speaker, let's focus a little bit on what a central message does for an audience. From an audience's perspective, a central message should be the idea that emerges from everything that you say. In other words, In a well-designed talk or a written piece, a central message would be your audience's response if you ask them to summarize your communication effort in one sentence. And I also want to come back to this idea about how your central message is going to shift with different audiences. Since different audiences have different needs for their messages, you need to be thoughtful and work to adapt your central message to resonate with your audience. You're not going to have the same central message for a legislator as you would for a child in a science museum. And if you shape your central message with your audience in mind, it will be much more memorable for them, and therefore your communication effort will be much more effective. So, how do you go about developing a central message? And I would argue that triage, or the act of cutting out absolutely everything that isn't necessary to being there, is key to finding and developing a central message. And at Relate, we like to use an improv exercise that we've adapted called Half-Life. So head over to the next segment, you can see a demonstration of this.